Hi, I'm Ed Carmack. This is the first of several training sessions designed to help you get started with creating reports from the data in our institutional data management system called Colleague. Specifically, we'll be talking about reporting from a special Colleague database called the Operational Data Store, or ODS. Before we begin, I want to point out that you can enlarge this video to display as full screen by clicking the icon in the bottom right corner of the video window as shown here. Also, if you haven't already done so, you might want to print a copy of the Topic 1 handout, which is linked as a resource on the training website under Topic 1. You can use the handout as an aid in note-taking and as a place to record any questions you may want to follow up on later. If you need to, please pause this video now and get the handout. All set? Okay, let's get started. Report writing requires certain technical skills, but more importantly, it requires intimate knowledge of the data and its structure and its use. I'm assuming you're familiar with the data in Colleague, at least that data specific to your function, and that you now need to know how to access it for reporting. That means you'll need to be able to extract that data from the database and form it into a product that satisfies a requirement or need that you have. But before we can talk about creating reports, we need to understand some fundamental database concepts and agree on some terminology that will be needed as we go forward. So, since the subject of our training is ODS reporting, what exactly is ODS and how does it differ from Colleague? Well, Colleague is a system of programs or program modules that's built to facilitate certain well-defined business processes associated with institutions of higher education, like admissions and registration and financial aid and so forth. And its core, Colleague is a complex database, but its functionality is centered on using the data to accomplish business processes. So as users, we see Colleague as a series of screen forms. And our challenge is to learn what data is on what form and which form to use for which purpose. Everything revolves around forms and processes. So our mental model of the data and its organization is based on the forms that we use to work with it. But as report writers, we have to understand that the organization and storage of data in the database has nothing to do with the forms that are used to display it. And rather than knowing on which form a particular data field resides, we need to know where and how the data is actually stored. So we need a different mental model of the database organization. As Colleague evolved, the underlying database became fairly complex and difficult to work with directly by the average Colleague user. As a result, a separate simplified database called the Operational Data Store, or ODS, was developed to facilitate report writing. A Colleague program called Data Orchestrator is used to create the ODS. Data Orchestrator extracts certain Colleague data fields, reorganizes them, and in some cases transforms them into 5 separate categories of information called ODS data models. These data models are called Core, Student, HR, Finance, and Advancement. On this diagram, we see the 5 data models that make up the ODS. Each data model is composed of a number of subject areas that are related to the model. As you can see, the student data model has subject areas that are named applicants, applications, courses, faculty, enrollment, and so forth. All these subject areas are related in some way to students. And some subjects are related to other subjects. For instance, applicants and applications are related because applicants file applications. Also, a subject area in one data model may be related to a subject in another data model, for instance, demographics and applicants. Each applicant has a demographic record. In the ODS database, we can think of subjects as tables or files, each with data fields that are pertinent to that subject. This will be our new mental model of the organization of data within ODS, and this is also the model on which all the ODS documentation is organized. Our biggest report writing challenge will be to figure out where a particular data element is located in the ODS, and this mental model should help us with that. Here are some key characteristics of the ODS which are important for you to be aware of. First of all, the ODS is not a clone of Colleague. The data fields are extracted from Colleague, but they're simplified. The data fields are reorganized into subject areas, and multi-valued fields from Colleague are transformed into single-valued fields in the ODS, which are much easier to work with when we write reports. And also, computed columns are transformed into their actual values, which again is easier for us to work with in reporting. Certain data fields that are included in Colleague are really not essential for report writing, and so the ODS excludes those. We don't include unnecessary fields from Colleague in the ODS. Colleague data fields that are not currently in the ODS, however, could be added if we need them. And data that's not in Colleague at all, but may be available elsewhere in maybe an Access database or something, can be added to the ODS if it would be helpful. ODS allows users to access the data using standard Microsoft Office tools, as well as many other SQL-based reporting tools and programming languages. So why do we need ODS? Why not just report directly from Colleague? Well, as I said before, Colleague is built to facilitate well-defined business processes. By its nature, ad hoc reporting is not well defined. The specifics of what is required in a report change with every report. In a few instances where reports can be defined in advance, Colleague does have pre-built reports that can be run. But for the most part, reports must be created as the need arises. The Colleague database design is complex and doesn't conform to standard relational database principles. And the upshot of that is that industry standard reporting tools won't work directly with Colleague, and report programming from within Colleague requires expert programming skills. So ODS reduces complexity because it's a standard relational database containing only essential data organized by subject area and accessible by standard tools. Lastly, the ODS protects our Colleague data because ODS is a completely separate database from Colleague. And if we goof something up in the ODS, all we have to do is refresh it from the Colleague data. So hopefully you now have an idea as to what the ODS is and where it fits in Colleague reporting. So in the next session, we'll look at some general database terminology and concepts that you'll need to know as we go forward.